there's a lot happening in Knock'em Stiff. There's a serial killer couple that's a husband and wife team. There's one preacher who pours spiders on himself. There's another who has a taste for young flesh. There's a war veteran who will do anything to get the Lord to cure his wife's cancer. But all these stories lack a reason for existing. They don't have any real insight into the human condition, and they really just lack empathy. It's a very lurid, despairing world portrayed in The Devil all the time. And while there's some great performances, and it's rich with incident, a lot happens, I can't help but feel that there's really no purpose to any of it except to keep the audience entertained, which for some people I think it will pull that off. But to me, there was so much happening and so little in the way of a coherent narrative that I just found it not particularly spellbinding, because when so much is happening, it's almost as if nothing is happening because you lose the impact of it. A lot of people, I think, will like the narration from Donald Ray Pollock, who wrote the book that this is based on. But from my perspective, it breaks the spell of the narrative, and it spoils some moments before they happen that would have been better if the audience didn't know that they were coming. He oftentimes tells you things about characters that you wouldn't know and would be better to come out in the narrative. And I personally found that voiceover almost never is a good aid to a story. If you're bringing in a voiceover, then you have to realize there's probably something lacking in the way that you're telling the story. And I think that the problem here is that there's just too much going on and too many characters that are thinly written because there just isn't enough time to develop them a whole lot. And because of that, you have to have the voiceover to give them a little bit of texture, a little bit of detail. The actors here are fantastic. They do a lot with what they're given, which I didn't think was much. But in the book, these characters were even thinner, I think, because you didn't have these human beings giving them beating hearts. And I think that it helps to see them on screen where at least you have an actor that is recognizably human playing these characters that to me are not real human beings. I think that this story, it shows you only one side of human nature. And as I said, that's the lurid side of human nature. It shows these people in rural areas living in poverty and despair and turning to religion sometimes in the midst of that despair. But it doesn't really have anything to say about the human condition in my mind that you couldn't find out just by living a few days in this world. I always point out it's really easy to depress people. There's just so many bad things going on in real life, and to me a story should have something to say about that, or what's the point? And arguably there isn't any here. The director, again, Antonio Campos, acquits himself adequately as a director and a writer, but I just don't really understand why anyone would want to invest too deeply in this world. Like I said, the story doesn't really have a plot. A lot of these characters are introduced only to die within a few minutes of their first appearance, so it's almost impossible to summarize what happens here without spoiling character deaths at the very least. It's rich with incident. There's always something pretty shocking happening, as I said, but there's enough coincidences here that I think it would make Dickens blush. And I think those coincidences are the only thing giving this film kind of the semblance of a plot. When there really isn't one, it's just a bunch of random incidents. And this is a good example of how incidents don't really make a story. There was a line in the book, everyone suffers, each in his own way. And I was concerned when I read that line fairly early on in the book. I thought, I hope that is not the thesis statement of this story, because that's really not much. That's really, really simple, and I think most people already know that everybody suffers. But that was really it. That was the thesis statement of the story, as far as I could tell. I think that the actors, as I said, they all acquit themselves well. I think that the reason that they're here is, I wouldn't put this past them, is that you aren't normally allowed to play these types of characters if you're an actor in the age range of a lot of the actors here. You know, Tom Holland, I feel like, as good of an actor as he is, I think he has a hard time finding serious roles, since most people just see him as the puppy dog faced Spider-Man. So here, you know, being able to play someone decidedly more lethal and with a more gritty backstory, I'm sure was an exciting opportunity for him. And he doesn't acquit himself poorly at all, but I would argue he is a little bit miscast. He just doesn't come off as lethal. I think he's very physically capable, which comes off. He comes off as someone that is capable of using a gun and capable of fighting with fisticuffs well, but he just never brings the darkness to this role that I think a different actor might have been able to. And I think that makes it a little bit hard to take him seriously here. I do think that he is the least bad character in the story, so I guess that might have been part of the thinking with the casting. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people are excited to see Robert Pattinson here. He, you know, again, I think he has a bit of the same problem Leonardo DiCaprio has, where he's a very good-looking actor, very young actor, and he looks even younger than he is. So he plays this character that, based on the way the character was described in the book, it's this, you know, preacher that's very, very charismatic and uses the Bible to justify his sinful proclivities. But I feel that because he looks so young, even though he technically plays this character very well, I think the voice work he does, the voice he finds for this role, is nothing short of astonishing. And I'm continue to be amazed that he is so gutsy as an actor to take on these roles that I think a lot of other actors would be frightened to take for how they would be perceived and how it might make people see them. So kudos to him for doing that, but I just think that it takes you out when you look at this actor and think he's way too handsome and young to be what this character would actually be like. Otherwise, I mean, there's a huge cast. I mean, you've got Sebastian Stan, Mia Wasikowska, Eliza Scanlon, Jason Clarke, Haley Bennett, Bill Skarsgard. Just, you know, a very, very strong cast. But I personally felt that none of them had enough time to really make an impression. They all gave good enough performances that they could definitely cut a nice highlight reel together for their next audition for a role. But otherwise, I just didn't think there was a whole lot to their characters. They just were born into this world to die, as the novel says. So overall, I can't really recommend that you watch this unless you're just intoxicated with the lurid and you just enjoy seeing shocking, not really motivated events taking place consistently. I could understand you watching it for that reason, but for me personally, it's just not enough, and I wouldn't really recommend it. So those are just my thoughts, though. So if you're interested in seeing more reviews on this channel, please consider subscribing. Leave your thoughts down below, and as always, you can watch more videos right now.